Okay, I think we're live. Welcome, everyone. Let's try not to look too terrified. I'm Emily. Hello. I'm senior producer at Sage Gateshead, which is the venue partner for Tusk when it's normally happening in the real world. If you can't see me, I am a white woman with glasses. I've got long blonde, slightly pink hair and a fringe. And I'm delighted to be hosting this panel titled Inclusion in Music, Raising Awareness, Eliminating Barriers and Changing Culture. And as you can see, I'm joined by three brilliant artists from the Tusk lineup. We have Gretchen Oury, Mariam Rezai and Galen Lee, and I'll ask them to introduce themselves properly in a minute. We are live, which is very exciting, which means we can also take some questions from the audience at the end. So get thinking and drop those in the chat as we go along, and any comments, and I'll be keeping an eye out for those. If you're watching this on the Tusk website rather than Vimeo, in the bottom right hand corner of the video window, if you click on the word Vimeo, it will take you to the website where you can then join the chat. There's no chat on the Tusk website itself. And this discussion is also being captioned by Stage Tech as well, so hopefully you can also see the captions. So to kick things off, if you guys would like to introduce yourselves, should we start with Galen? You'd like to go first?
Hello, everybody. My name is Galen Lee, and I am a small Caucasian woman. I use an electric wheelchair. I have brown hair that's pulled up into two buns on either side of my head. I have a blue flower in my hair. I'm wearing a black pattern dress, sitting in in front of my kitchen table, and there's a painting of sheep behind me, which I got specifically from our laundry room that was free because it reminded me of England. So I like sheep a lot. So I am a musician, a violinist, and a songwriter, and I also have a disability. So I do a lot of talking about accessibility in the arts and trying to make change, not just with disabled artists and venues, but try to encourage able-bodied artists to change their venue standards as well. So I'm honored to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Gretchen?
Hello, I am Gretchen Oury. I am a multicolored trans woman. I mean, my hair is multicolored. I'm a white trans woman with multicolored hair and no eyebrows. I'm in my recording or music room in my house. My mind's gone really blank now. I'm wearing a patterned cardigan that glows under UV light. I'm a musician. I play in a few different groups, but my rock band Gutter Snipe was what's been featured in the Tusk program, I'm interested. I've been involved also in some other kinds of low-key DIY operations for trying to increase awareness about transgender and autism related issues in the underground. So yeah, that's enough for me for now, I think.
Fantastic, thanks. Mariam?
Hello, my name is Mariam Rezai. I am mixed heritage, Anglo-Iranian. I have long dark hair, big black eyeliner, big red lips today, wearing a black dress. Behind me is a writing desk, poster of Thelonious Monk, and a lovely print by Yol, who is a Tusk Fringe Artist in Residence this year. I was lucky I got that last year for our Tusk Fringe last year. I'm a musician. I'm part of the Old Police House Collective. I do many different things, and I'm very pleased to be here.
Thanks, amazing. It's a fantastic array of people to be speaking to, and I think we're talking about a really big topic, and we're only really going to scratch the surface. I feel like we could do an hour each with each of you on this, but we'll do our best. I guess to begin with, it might be useful to just speak briefly about what we mean by the word inclusion in this context, because it can be seen as a bit jargony, perhaps. I mean, taking it very literally, it's not excluding anyone, but actually it goes much further than that. There's a saying that's been quoted quite a lot in the last few years that diversity is being invited to the party and inclusion is being asked to dance. I think actually since that has become popularized, that's been extended to the idea that inclusion actually is organizing the party. It's not just taking part in something, which is an idea that we might come back to later on in the discussion, I hope. I think it's a very difficult thing to define in a in a small amount of time like that. But to begin with, I guess it would be useful to talk about why this is such an important issue, inclusion and access in music, and why we should be speaking about it now. Galen, would you like to kick off on this? I feel like it's a topic you're quite familiar with speaking about.
Yes, I'm very passionate about this. So to me, inclusion is extremely important for changing the way we perceive disability in our culture as a whole. It's one thing to be inclusive and diverse in your lineups, which I think is really important. But the thing that we don't talk about enough, I think, is how many barriers to entry there are still for disabled artists. So you may see us out there, but how much harder did we have to do stuff to make our careers happen? I don't think it's equal at this point. Just with finding accessible venues or getting the same kind of coverage that's not biased or negative or only focused on disability and not taken seriously as an artist. There's a lot of layers of complexity to that. But the reason I think it's so important is disability, first of all, needs to be there needs to be more understanding about disability. Like our culture has to do better to make sure that we're not always lagging behind in all areas of life, like economic or higher levels of abuse or all these other things. And so if you don't raise awareness about disability in general, how are we going to fix the problems? But it goes farther than that for me. I think valuing disability as a diverse part of culture that actually enriches it and makes our world a cooler, better place, getting beyond just the barriers and talking about what assets we bring to culture. I just think that makes the world more welcoming, not just for us, but for everybody of all different minorities, or all different kinds of people, personalities even. I think it's important that we embrace all sorts of art in a really active way and let us be in charge of not just coordinating, but being able to feel like our careers are taken as seriously as other artists' careers and for the right reasons, which is art. So, yes.
Absolutely, yeah. You have to think about what you're missing out on hearing if you're not hearing from all people, a range of people. Mariam or Gretchen, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really accurate what Galen was saying, that I still think there is a lot of there's a lot of bringing a lot of people up to date with how to engage respectfully and in a kind of also in an individual and honest way with differently able people in the underground community and also just kind of in the wider arts community. And I'm really pleased at how much increase in visibility certain things have gained in the last few years, but yeah, there's still a long way to go. And I really like what Galen was saying just then about how it does ultimately serve everyone well for the sort of definition of what an artist or what somebody who's eligible to participate in this kind of sphere looks like or presents as, because it just I really think it creates a more interesting and pleasant world for us all to live in.
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. I think to kind of give some sort of personal experiences and some context to this, it'd be really interesting to hear about how each of you kind of started your career and kind of got into making music in that sort of experimental or underground or DIY scene. And it'd be interesting to hear about any particular barriers that you faced or anything that you feel really enabled you to overcome some of those things or kind of really get where you were going along the way. Mariam, would you like to start on that?
Yeah. I mean, I've been a musician since I was very little, and I trained classically because I wanted to play piano from. I don't remember not wanting to play the piano, and I got one when, just a second-hand cheap one when I was very young. And it's an interesting question asking about barriers, and I often found it was people people who were supposed to be a mentor, someone who was supposed to support, to help enable. I often found at school, teachers would stop, say, that's not right. I was told at school that I couldn't sing and I shouldn't sing. And I didn't sing for a very long time. I love singing and I have a big voice. I do. But that really held me back for a very long time. Something very simple, being a child and being told, oh no, that's not good, you shouldn't do that. You go play something else. I'm interested in turntables and play the classical piano. And I was, 14, 15, I got interested in turntables and wanted to DJ. And what I did have was a supportive family. And a mum and dad who said, well, okay, well, you've had all the piano lessons and I did want to be a classical musician and performer. And said, if you want decks, you'll have to earn them. But I did. I got my job and earned my decks. And my mum and dad encouraged me, and there would be things like dropping me off, going out, picking me up and stuff like that. So I was safe because I'm a woman, going out, DJing by yourself when you're young isn't always a very safe adventure. And I don't think it matters what age you are, actually, it's not always safe. So along the way, I've had people that have told me, no, you shouldn't. And I had that again at university. I was told, no, you shouldn't do that. And I've had to fight. But I'm taking up all the airspace, so.
Thanks, that was great. And Gretchen, what were your experiences like? How did you kind of find your way into what you're doing now? And was there anything that kind of...
Oh, well, I mean, I've also been musically inclined from a really young, from when I was kind of a young teenager. I also am very lucky to have a supportive family in this capacity. But yeah, I was like, I was definitely, I had a lot of issues just like interfacing with any kind of social realm of like human endeavors. Like I didn't really get properly diagnosed with autism, even though I had all of the characteristics of it. I didn't get diagnosed until I was almost beginning university. I had kind of an incorrect diagnosis when I was younger and had been in psychiatric care and what have you. And yeah, my experience of school was horrendous. My experience of just trying to exist in the world and not receive extreme hostility a lot of the time, it was very, very challenging. And like music was always something that provided me like an escape from the real world that was mostly quite threatening. And this was complicated even more so when I came out as trans when I was about 16. I was a metalhead. And back then, the metal community was not welcoming to trans people. It was very homophobic, and I kind of had to. I was really into like rock gigs and going to rock shows and what have you when I was a young teenager, but I just stopped entirely when I came out as trans, and I switched to going to electronic music events, going to dance parties, because that was the first time I ever met anybody else who was transgender, who I never really met even any other LGBT people other than my partner at the time. That was a kind of a revelation in a lot of ways, to see like a lot of people who were a lot more similar to me having fun and feeling welcome, even though we were strange looking and presenting in ways that were confusing to people. But then also there was some other kind of sad reasons why I also had to kind of stop going clubbing for a while, and I didn't really have any kind of active social existence, even though I did still keep playing music, until I moved to Leeds. And honestly, I really owe Wharf Chambers, the venue in Leeds, I owe them and the community of weirdos that is built around that place a lot. Like I owe them a really a lot, because I would not have. I really don't think I definitely, in fact, wouldn't be sat here speaking to you right now if it hadn't have been for that place, because that was the first place where I saw other transgender people playing rock music and playing other kinds of music, and just being like a context for inclusion of people like myself. There being like any sort of, like I remember going there for the first few times that I went, and yeah, I mean, at first I was terrified and I couldn't speak to anybody. I mostly just stood in a corner, not talking to anybody, and kind of trying to enjoy the experience, whilst still kind of finding some elements of it a little bit more challenging. But fortunately, one of the other great things about Wolf Chambers and the way that it's structured is that the gig area is separate to the bar area, and I don't drink alcohol. And I'm not fond of it, or the culture that kind of surrounds it. I know it's not a very popular position, but I do think that for me and a lot of other like autistic people and a lot of other people who kind of find like a bar environment to be quite difficult to tolerate, that this is a really big barrier for a lot of people in like enjoying certain kinds of music, where it seems like, the way that the physical situation for like the show happening is normally very much tied into like a bar being in it, and the fact that the bar and the gig room are two separate areas, and then there's an outside area in Wolf Chambers. It really allows people who can't deal with the traditional like bar setting to still be able to participate. And yeah, it was amazing just seeing like, I mean, I sincerely really loved all that kind of very extreme music when I was younger, but like the more I kind of started to be aware of the fact that like a lot of its practitioners had really terrible politics and really like just disgusting kind of worldviews that were very much like hatefully inclined, and I really kind of specifically were targeted at women and queer people and people of color and like anyone who wasn't like a white guy, basically. I just had to I kind of just couldn't stand it anymore, and it was music that I really connected to it on a kind of a psychological psychoacoustic level. Like it was not about like the lyrics or about like what it it connected to me, but I had to stop listening to that stuff and was removed from that community, which was difficult. But I just had no idea that like I remember it's funny that the band that really changed it for me was when I went to Wolf Chambers for the first time, and I saw, maybe it wasn't the first time I went, but it was one of the first times I went, but it was the first time I saw Etta Kashiki, which was the old band of the drummer, the other half of my band Gutter Snipe. I saw like his band, and they were like a queer band, with with an amazing guitarist and singer who was also a trans woman. And for me, this was just incredible to see like queer people on stage playing like ferocious music, and it being like really, to me, more impressive and more savage and more like interesting than any of this kind of absurd like posturing macho stuff that I'd encountered previously. And it just really like, you know, and there was trans women in the audience, and there was, you know, people with other kinds of physical disabilities, and there was people of color, and there's, you know, just all kinds of different people where I was like, wow, this is just and this was right under, you know, I moved down south to go to university because it was the only uni I could find that was doing the course I was after. But like, yeah, I mean, I'm from Wales originally, but I've lived a lot of my life in Yorkshire. So the fact that it was like just right under my nose the whole time was amazing. And yeah, like that was a huge turning point for me. And, you know, then meeting also, yeah, I mean, people like Mariam and Adam and stuff that do the old police house and what have you, and just discovering that there was kind of this underground network of people who would accept people like me, who, because in other contexts it was just scary. It was scary going to, just being outside or being walking around in the town center, just being at a gig was scary, like beforehand. And it was like really the first time, you know, even when I was going raving, when I met other queer people, as I say, it was like certain places that I went to, like you would get, you know, like trouble from bouncers and stuff like that. Bouncers not letting you use the women's bathroom, and, you know, like threatening you with violence for trying to use the women's bathroom and stuff like that. And it was like the first time that I'd been somewhere where it was like, wow, this is not something I have to worry about. And everything was different for me since then. So yeah, I owe those guys a lot. If any of them are listening, they know that I love them. And yeah, that's definitely that was a really big turning point for me. And everything else from that point onwards is more kind of contextualized within the community that I guess that we're speaking in now. So yeah, that was quite a long answer. I'm sorry, but yeah, that's what I have to say.
That's an amazing story of kind of music being an escape, and then kind of taking some time to find your community in the space where you felt comfortable. Thank you for sharing all that. It was fantastic. And Galen, what's the backstory for you and the challenges?
Well, I guess there's sort of like different times of barriers being more prevalent, and then helpful things being more prevalent. So early on, and by the way, thank you for sharing, Gretchen. And I think it's important that people realize that like disability isn't a monolith, and also neither are humans. So it's important to hear from like a lot of different kinds of people, because we don't have the same experiences always, and just good to hear. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then, so I guess what I was going to say is that for me, early on, I got very lucky because I am so small. My arms and legs are bent because I can't, you know, I had brittle bone disease, and they broke before I was born. So when they healed, they're kind of bent, crooked. And so I happened to just get really lucky in that I had a teacher when I was in 5th grade. The public school teacher, not like a special one that we sought out, just happened to say, wow, I think we should try to adapt the instrument for you. And I didn't realize, because I think people don't understand it, especially if they don't have a physical disability, but I'm sure it extends to other areas too. But you adapt things all the time growing up. So it's not like adapting the violin scared me. That wasn't something that I felt was going to be hard to do. But what I didn't realize is it is very rare to find an adult that's willing to do that with you, especially a teacher. Like, we've all been told from different teachers that this isn't our strong suit or this won't work. And unfortunately on the road, because I've been able to meet a lot of disabled people are discouraged from ever trying to adapt an instrument and play it the way that works for their body. So I just got very lucky, and that was super helpful in that we kind of experimented, and I can't play it on my shoulder. I couldn't play the cello, it was too big, but I could play the violin up and down like a small cello, and that's how I play. And just having that push or like that encouragement early was huge. The barriers that I faced started later. I think that when I started touring, I assumed that all the access barriers I was facing were not existent in big towns. But then I did my first show in New York City, and I realized, like, holy cow, this is like a national problem. And then I went to England, and I was like, oh, this is an international problem. Like, accessibility is really problematic in most venues. You know, a lot of times I can't get into the venue at all, so I don't play at those venues anymore. Most times, there's not a ramp to the stage, and I used to let people lift my wheelchair onto the stage and then put me in my chair after. But eventually, I would go to these venues 2 years in a row, 3 years in a row, and they would never have a ramp. Like, even every time they'd be like, oh yeah, we really need to get a ramp, and it just wasn't happening. And I would say, well, why didn't you get a ramp? And they'd say, well, last year we just lifted you up. And I realized that their idea of equal access was like, as long as I could play the show, it was fine. But I feel like equality is like, you know, dignity and being able to get, you know, independence.
Yeah,
and so it was like, well, I don't feel like this is really equality. So I stopped playing. I play sometimes at venues without ramps to the stage, but if I do that, I play on the floor so that it's very obvious as to why I am not up there. And I don't have to talk about it from the stage because it's pretty clear to everybody why I'm down there. And I like that because it makes the venue owners feel bad, but not so bad that they don't ever want to have me back. And then the other thing is, like green rooms. I don't even look at green rooms. Like, I can barely get into any green rooms. A lot of times I'm changing in a bathroom stall or putting on my makeup in like the mop closet. And that's just not what other artists are facing. And I wish that wasn't the case. And so the biggest barrier I think that we face still going into the future is that these issues are we probably are all at this panel aware of those issues, but there's a lot of artists that continue to play at these kinds of venues that aren't accessible. And I think if it's just like 1 or 2 or 3 disabled artists doing it, I mean, it's better than nobody doing it, but I think it would be so much more effective if other artists started seeing discrimination of like venues the same as they would like for race or gender, you know, or sexual orientation. Like, if a venue hasn't made a effort to become accessible, especially in America, because we've had a law for 30 years. I know the UK is a little bit different, but we've had a law for 30 years. So any venue that has upgraded by now either should be moving to a better space where they can be accessible, or they should be being fined, like at this point in time. And so the problem is we don't enforce it. So it's not going to change unless artists make a stand. And I think it needs to be able-bodied artists and disabled artists both. And so the other barrier I'm facing now, it's kind of a double-edged sword, like technology with COVID. I'm very high risk. I'm not going to tour again until there's a vaccine and it's pretty safe to go out again. And so technology has been both awesome. Like, I do a YouTube show every single week and get to talk to people like live in the comments, and it's super, super fun. But things like captioning have posed to be very cost prohibitive. And I don't know if the UK has a better job of like subsidizing that for small artists, but I want to be accessible in my venue shows, but also on my digital shows. And so I'm struggling with that right now. But again, disability doesn't all look the same. And I think it's important not to leave out people digitally while we're transitioning. So I was happy that you have captions here, because I was kind of wondering, I was like, I wonder if they'll do that. So good job, because I think that gets left out, and I understand why. It was kind of funny because I've not only had trouble paying for this captioning, which I have been paying for, but I'm like losing money every week basically getting captions at my shows. But part of it is that YouTube is also just not user friendly, so they don't time up very well with the discussion. And I just feel like it would be hard for me to tell someone. I think it's easier for me to say, please don't play at an inaccessible venue, because there's a lot of venues, but it's harder for me to be like, you should pay for captioning every week, and they won't even work that well. So we just have a long ways to go before we get to a point where we're all kind of making our shows accessible as the norm, rather than like going above and beyond, quote unquote, because I don't think it is above and beyond. I think it should be the norm. So those are all my rants for right now, and I'll be back later.
Thanks very much. It's an interesting point about able-bodied artists as well, kind of having a role to play in this, because I've noticed recently in more artist riders that kind of accessibility for the audience and backstage has been included more frequently, which is a really good step in the right direction for that, I think. Something else I wanted to pick up on, because obviously Tusk is in the northeast and Sage is in the northeast, and Mariam, you're also based in Newcastle. Something we talk about quite a lot is socioeconomic diversity, or kind of class, I guess. I'm quite interested to know your perspective on this, Mariam, since you're based in the area, in terms of what impact that has on someone's ability to kind of make a career in music.
It's a very big topic. I think Gretchen will have something to add into this as I talk about it too. Where do you start? I suppose looking back from, when I was younger, my mum and dad had to earn everything, to buy everything, to enable me to access the arts. Being in the north, we have difficulty accessing kit, space, money, work. It's such a huge topic. It's such a huge issue. I don't really know where to begin with that. I think some of that, it links back to the conversation we've just had about inclusivity and barriers, and Gretchen and Galen both talking about there being spaces made available. And one thing that I've considered quite a lot recently in conversation with other people is, what is the currency that we need in our scene? Because it may not be money. And that's something I think that can start to chip away at class. I think that we have a number of different people who help facilitate in the Northeast. Those people are equitable, as well as promoting equality. And some of the currency that is used is, as something as simple as a skills swap to help enable, to help encourage, nurture. I think it's very important that artists are able to access a space. I think, and going back to exactly what Gretchen and Galen were talking about, a safe space for us all to feel accepted, to be able to then thrive, to experiment, to fail safely, to grow together safely, to share. And then when we're in each other's presence as a community builds, we learn and grow together. There are difficulties in the Northeast accessing spaces, because if not everyone has a large income, how can they access space? How can they access equipment? Where do they then get opportunities if they're not able to thrive, to experiment, to fail? All of these things. The old police house was started as a project. I was given in-kind support and a safe space that I was able to share with other people, and that was taken away for financial reasons. And it's been a struggle with the old police house for, since that has happened. We've done most things on a shoestring budget of virtually no budget. And, where we contribute as much as we can financially and share. There are things that have to be paid for in the world. But I wonder, Gretchen and Galen, what you feel now about safe spaces out on the internet, because Galen started talking about access on the internet. And one thing that we have with Tusk this year is it's online. And actually, I know a number of friends who wouldn't have made it to Tusk Festival because of finances. And because it's not about just going to Gateshead, to the Sage. It's about staying in the hotel. It's about eating. It's about buying an expensive drink and buying an expensive bag of chips on the way home. All these things, they are, they cost. And there are so many more factors that we have to bear in mind. I just wondered if you had anything to add to that as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point that you make. I mean, the only time I actually attended the festival was when I played, and it's similar to the kind of challenge that I face with, like, I think this a lot when I'm kind of touring as well. It's just like, I wouldn't get to be in this place if they hadn't have paid for me to be here. Like, it's not something that there are just kind of like a lot of privileges of access that a lot of people really take for granted that people in this community just don't have. And we all kind of really try to pool our resources as much as possible, but we are up against a lot. Like it's I mean, just it's like Mariam is saying, like there's just so much emphasis always in this country, the where the arts money and where just like even the kind of general like advertising or kind of public image of like culture or whatever is really very much focused on the south of England, and the rest of the UK doesn't really get a look in a lot of the time. It's like we've managed to make do in the kind of in the spaces that we can find. And like I'm amazed that some places have managed to stay open as long as they have. But it's always kind of like this thing where like at the end of the day these spaces often are like they're there for us to use because no one else wants them. And so there are lots of it's like if it's not it's like you're also kind of having to consider things like the people the government or the council whatever trying to shut you down because it doesn't meet health and safety codes or this kind of thing. And there's obviously no it's like the whole operation is entirely independent, so it's like people are having to really take on a big job of both ensuring that it is accessible to all different kinds of people, and also to make sure that it kind of like fits what the definition of a that it's making enough money, or that it's like that it meets health and safety codes, or that it's like that it's kind of it's not situated in a place where like, oh well, we could use this building for something other than an experimental music venue, like, oh, this could just be more student flats or more bars or whatever. And it is it's like it's really tough. Like people up here in the north like do struggle a lot more. And I think there's just generally kind of this I feel like people in the south and what have you, there's this cultural idea that people look down on us a lot, like up here, like we're just kind of like we're just backward or something. And I don't really I think it's totally the opposite of that. In a what the sentiment and the tenacity and the like just the kind of commitment to the cause that is like that is kind of shown by people up here is really like totally sincere and really, as for me, it's shown to kind of endure even in the face of like a lot of adversity. So I do, but it's just it is like Mariam's saying, it's like you could really, when if you actually had to dissect this, it's not a topic that could be covered quickly. There's many factors that are really kind of out of our control, and a lot of the time I feel like the best thing we can do is just try and manage with what we've got. But I mean, it's like, with this whole
it would help if the government did help.
And they don't. I mean, in this period with the coronavirus, with all the venues, kind of some venues getting a handout. I mean, Wolf Chambers didn't get that money. They had to appeal, and I actually don't know how that went. Like, I mean, they put out an open call for artists and various other people who've used that space and know how valuable that space is to kind of contribute and give a testimony of how important that space is. But I mean, it's like, it's such a corner, and anybody who's active in experimental music or DIY, not even experimental music, just kind of anything that's not commercial, who's played in Leeds, knows about Wolf Chambers, and they know how special it is. And it's just it's insane that they didn't get that much. They didn't meet the requirements as being like a proper venue or something like that. Because I mean, ultimately, they try and cover all the bases. They try to do a lot of things for lots of different kinds of communities, and so their space is multifunctional. You know, they try and have art stuff there. They try and have like they try and kind of host a lot of like events for things that are more in line with like political efforts and this kind of thing, and it is all done independently. You know, so it's not like they have this kind of they don't have this structure to be able to kind of look to and be like, oh, this is how we proceed with this. They've got to figure it out on their own, and they've done a really good job. But yeah, it's like it's an insult that the government is just they really don't care. Like they see live music as being like big commercial venues where mainstream shows happen, and underground venues which are like they provide a point of access for so many different kinds of people who would not feel safe or would not feel comfortable or whatever in these other kinds of spaces. Like it's just like to me it just seems like they're just closing the door to those people. And
Galen, did you want to come in on this as well?
Well, I am excited that we're connecting the two things. First of all, I love Wharf Chambers. I've played there before, and it's an awesome space. It's so cool, and I'm glad that you are talking about them because they're really important. They're a really important organization. I guess what I was going to say is that I think disability in America, if you're disabled, you're twice as likely to live in poverty as everybody else. And so I think this is an issue that we really should be talking about. And I did a show in San Francisco, which is a very expensive city. And it was a bigger show, big for me. I mean, I'm not a big artist. I'm actually very, very DIY, but this was a venue. I do pretty well out there. So this guy rented a venue. But in order to make sure that we covered it, he charged $25 a ticket, which he said in San Francisco, that's very typical. So I was kind of nervous about that, but he's like, no, this is very typical. There were no disabled people, visibly disabled anyways, in the audience that night, which was so sad because the year before it was like 25%. And so I found on Facebook some comments about why the show is so expensive. And it really made me, I already knew that it was just because I myself am disabled. And I was like, that's a lot of money, right, for a ticket. But he assured me San Fran is a bigger market, blah, blah, blah. So after that, I realized that whenever possible, I try to make my shows donation only, or I'll set a suggested donation, but there's like no questions asked if you donate less, like a Eventbrite, but there's other ways to do it. PayPal, you could do a million different ways of like advanced purchase, suggested donation. So setting a price helps because most people donate the price, but some people don't, and I think that's great. Like that's the whole point of it. And then the other thing is if it is a venue that won't let me do donation only, because some venues won't let you do that, I ask them to make a discount code, and I put like if you are low income, use this code, but I put the code right on the event page. So like it's really obvious because I feel like disabled people are always asked to jump through these, like email this guy and then wait 3 days. And, I want to make it so easy. So I put it on the page. But when I did that, I had a pretty big event in Minnesota where I live. And when I did that, only like maybe 12 people took it up out of like 170, but they did. And that, I think that people who can pay for art do want to pay for art, but we shouldn't be limiting who gets to have art based on if you can pay. You know what I mean? So that's my rant for the day. Oh, the other thing I was going to say, though, is I do think it's really important there's 3 little quick things. I've been doing Patreon for about a year, and I think it's pretty awesome. I mean, there's probably other ways to do a subscription thing, but having people who can afford to support your work, and it doesn't have to be a lot, like $5 a month or something, has been really helpful for me. So I don't feel like I have to get all my money from gigs, because that's, especially right now, pretty hard to do. The other thing is I think sharing things online for economic equality as well as accessibility. I mean, I'm hoping that when we are all done with coronavirus, that we don't just stop doing virtual events. I've gotten to see Barack Obama live on Zoom. When the heck would that have ever happened in real life? That would never have happened. So that it can provide more access to you that way. And then the other thing is playing at alternative venues. I don't play in a lot of basements for obvious reasons because I can't get down there. And my music is not like rave oriented. It's very, everybody's sitting down and some of them are crying. That's kind of the vibe of my show. So the thing is the places I found luck with are places like yoga studios or small churches. Usually don't charge a rental fee or a very low one, and they're usually more accessible than a lot of traditional venues. And then I can do whatever I want with ticket sales. So like, as much as it's frustrating to be left out of the mainstream culture, because I think that is a thing that happens, we get kind of looked over or not taken, not championed by the press in the same way as other artists. I think there is some. I don't necessarily want to fit into a system that's broken, is what I'm trying to say. Like, if the system sucks, maybe we just make a new system over here that is more inclusive, and then why not just do that? And it might not be the same like mainstream vibe, but people who appreciate it are gonna understand what you're doing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And you've segued perfectly into my final question before we come to questions from anyone in the audience. So if you've got any questions, just stick them in the chat. Someone has said we would absolutely book Galen at a rave, to be fair.
Well, that's good to know.
People need to sit on the floor and cry after they've been dancing for 12 hours.
Okay, well then I'll be the closer.
Yeah, Galen, you'd go down a storm at 3 a.m. at the police house, I promise you.
Okay, cool. That's good to hear.
Make it happen. So yeah, you were just talking about kind of positive solutions and creating new systems and stuff, which is exactly what I wanted to just kind of wrap up with before we go to questions, which is kind of some positive things that you guys feel we could do to actually make a change and change this culture and remove some of those barriers and improve inclusion. Again, this is a massive question, but maybe one thing each. Is that possible? Galen, do you want to go first?
Sure. I would just say find your allies, like the other disabled artists or the organizations or whatever. Attitude is Everything is big in England, and I know there are probably other ones that I don't know of. Find your allies, and then don't be afraid to set barriers, or like not barriers, ground rules for yourself. Like, you don't have to play at a shitty place that isn't accessible. And I know that it limits yourself temporarily, but I think our long-term goal should be like, in another generation, are we still going to be dealing with the same stuff? Like, I don't want to be. So I think if we set ground rules for ourselves, or guidelines, or like a line that you won't cross, this is the bare minimum. I don't necessarily require complete full beautiful access, because there'd be like 4 venues in the world that I could play at if I did that. But making sure people can get in and use the bathroom is like, I can't do shows that don't have those rules in place anymore. Like, you have to be able to use the bathroom, you have to be able to get in and look at the stage. And if you can't do those things, then this venue isn't for me. And it does limit where you can play, but I think in the end game, you see progress. And the one example I want to give to that is there was a venue that was like a church turned music venue in North Carolina. It was the most random place. I was actually kind of nervous. Like, they were very liberal, but I wasn't sure if it was going to be like, I had to do a lot of researching on the website to make sure it'd be a welcoming space, which it was. So they didn't have a ramp to the stage, but they had an accessible bathroom. I could get into the venue. So I said, it'd be really great. Here's like a ramp that you could build. Here's a ramp you could buy. Here's a stage lift, blah, blah, blah. And I just kind of told him this stuff in an email, the owner. And I got a call from him about a week before my show. So this was a couple months earlier. I got a call from him a week before my show that they had done a fundraiser 2 months earlier in order to raise money for an electric stage lift, and they were having it installed that day. And so he kind of got what I meant, is it doesn't have to be part of your normal operating budget. You can be creative and like ask the people who support your work to help you improve your space to make the arts more accessible. And other places have built ramps for sure, but he's the only one that was like, this is in our range of doability if we just ask everybody to chip in what they can. And so they had a stage lift for me, and it was so cool that he understood the long-term goal. And I think the more boundaries we set with ourselves and make it very clear our expectations, of venues, it might be slow and it might feel like it's hurting your own career, because it might for a while. I think in the long run, though, the benefits will far outweigh the costs of being firm with your own boundaries, if that makes sense.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. That's a really great positive example of someone actually doing it as well. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I was so proud of him. I think I cried a little bit on the phone.
Gretchen, what's your one thing that we
I
could
mean,
be doing?
I think that's really great. That's a really nice story, Galen, as well. I really appreciated hearing about that. But yeah, I mean, I guess kind of my response is sort of building off what Galen just said, which is that, yeah, like, I mean, I think, like, in a lot of ways, I mean, there's clearly many very challenging, like, practical obstacles in terms of like how to kind of implement things where you're dealing with like institutional factors and kind of like things where you need to get like permission from the government or from the council or whatever to do something surrounding a space. Like, those things are a challenge in and of themselves, and they're kind of not necessarily like, I can't really speak for that, but I do think that the issue of more of it being kind of, yeah, an ideological, like a philosophical thing of people just kind of changing their outlook, and yeah, just saying like, okay, we're not, we're not gonna allow this shitty behavior anymore. We're not gonna keep relying on these old models of like how something is actually achieved. I mean, like, I mean, for me, I don't know, that's kind of what like DIY and like socialism or whatever is supposed to be about, is recognizing that like everybody has different skills and everybody can offer something useful if they're if it's, if everything is, if the situation is kind of transparent. I mean, it's this the problem is generally, the world operates on this kind of hierarchic principle that there's like, well, there's this person who is in charge, and then these are their rules, and like if you're not like that person, then you don't get to be involved in it. And I think if like things were kind of, if these things, if events and all the rest were implemented in a way that recognizes this more, I think there's like a lot of ways in which like you can, I mean, just again, to just use Wolf Chambers as an example, it's like often they have like, somebody who prepares vegan food who kind of comes to the venue and just does that, or, it's like they will find somebody who's, like when I'm putting a show on at Wolf Chambers, I will be like, okay, maybe I will normally try, if I'm doing it, I'll normally try to prepare some food for the other bands. But if not, I will ask somebody else, like, oh, do you want to cook food for the bands and you get in for free? Or like, does somebody who can't afford to pay in, like, who I wouldn't ask a random person normally, because like we always say anyway, but that if you don't have any money you can come in anyway. But in terms of people I know personally, there's a million different things that need to be done at a show. There's somebody who needs to do the door, there's somebody who needs to like just kind of check everything is going okay, like somebody who might be useful if there's a technical problem or what have you. And there's so many different roles that like people with different kinds of, like generally at these shows, it's like somebody is gonna have something useful to offer. And I think if it was just kind of things were done in a different way, where it was like, okay, well, we're gonna just recognize from this point on the kinds of people who are interested in this kind of event are not going to fit any pre-existing template of what like normal is, and that you just aren't going to make any assumptions about what somebody can and can't do. And it's kind of up to the person, to the other, it's up to each individual to present as they will, and that they will be respected for it. And that if they have something to offer, I think it's entirely possible to create just like a general environment where people are comfortable saying like, oh, I can help with this, or like, I can, I can help you solve your computer problems, or I can like just there's just a million different things that like go into the whole process, and I think like professional, this whole idea of professional kind of big time spaces and stuff, they do a lot of they really make it look like everything just kind of happens, and there's not like a team of people, or it's like the face of each event is just like whoever put the show on, and they don't really give credit to like the hundreds of people who kind of just do menial jobs or whatever, that all collectively adds together to like this thing happening. And I think like, yeah, I also, like Galen was saying, I don't just want to see, it's not like there be, this whole thing of sometimes people with disabilities can be kind of put on a pedestal, and it's like, oh well, this is kind of interesting as a novelty sort of thing that they have a disability, but I don't just want to see more inclusion of people playing. I want to see them I want to see other people like me and other differently able people included in all parts of the process. Like I don't just want to, I don't want it to be just me and then like, a bunch of white straight guys like running every other, it's really, for me, it's been, in certain instances, it's been very heartwarming to just see, like another queer person working the door or whatever.
It comes back to, as I said at the beginning, inclusion being organizing the party, not just dancing at the party, I guess.
Right.
Yeah, definitely.
So great.
We're about to run out of time. I'm really sorry, guys. It's been so fascinating. Mariam, is there anything you want to say just as kind of closing comments very quickly?
Just linking in with everything that Galen and Gretchen have said, I think that the answer to a positive future moving forward lies with all of us. It lies with every link in the creative chain of the DIY scene and the creative. We all have to take responsibility. We all have to stop, and we have to listen. We have to ask. Every person in this room is a safe person and will provide a safe space. And I know a lot of our audience sometimes feel intimidated and they want to learn. But I think, and I think you would agree, you're open to have those conversations.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you should say that and say that it will always be a safe space, but we all have to take responsibility, every single one.
Yeah, that's a lovely note to end on. Thank you. And on the theme of having conversations, we had lots of fantastic comments in the chat. No specific questions, which is why I kind of let's just roll on a little bit. But it certainly, if you guys are able to dip in and have a look, you might. I'm sure people will appreciate having a quick chat with you at the end. Thank you so much, all of you, for your time. That's been really fascinating. We've covered a huge amount of ground in 50 minutes. So yeah, thank you once again, Galen, Gretchen, Mariam, and Tusk, and Sean and Tom, who've been sorting out the IT side, and Kate, who's been doing the captioning. Thanks everyone for watching. It's been lovely chatting to you all. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.